Hey everyone, it is so good to be back here with you again, reading through the Bible together. This week we're going to be trekking through 3 different territories. Of course, as tradition would have it, we will be looking at a handful of Psalms, but we'll also be looking at the entire book of Esther along with the first 10 chapters of the book of Job. So let's not waste any time, let's jump in here. We'll start with the book of Esther. Now, it's probably one of the most fascinating stories in Jewish Old Testament history, in my opinion. It's a story of true intrigue in the royal palace of Susa. There's plot, there's counterplot, there's suspense, there's danger, and frankly, the undoing of the story's villain is just awesomely ironic. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this. It's the kind of narrative that you could go ahead and write a screenplay out of, and people would actually show up to see it. But if you haven't already read the story before, I'm not going to spoil it by giving you a preview. So there's a little plot twist of my own. However, I will say this about the story. It takes place over the course of about 4 years and is in the 3rd year of King Xerxes' reign, so about 483 BC approximately. It features a beautiful Jewish girl named Haddasah, whose Persian name is Esther, and then you have her elder cousin / father figure Mordecai. You've got this slick, sinister dude named Haman, and then of course you have King Xerxes himself. Now, the other thing that I want to mention about this, without giving anything else away, is that you're going to notice that as you read this story, or at least I hope you notice, that there is no mention of God in this story whatsoever. I mean, period. However, I still want you to be on the lookout for God's fingerprints throughout the story as you read it. Evidence, that the way things are playing out, that this could only be by God's divine plan. Just the way that he protects and provides for his people, through his people. I think you guys are really going to like this story this week. All right, so now we're going to press on into the book of Job. This is another really fascinating Old Testament narrative, and we find ourselves confronted with the question that critics of Christianity have been asking for years. And that is, if God is so good, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, as the book opens, we see the description of our man Job, who's really well-to-do. He loves and fears the Lord. And not only did he honor the Lord with his own life, but he sought to make sure that his family, his children, were doing the same thing as well. So in all, prospects were looking pretty good for our man Job here. However, it's about to turn into what Judith Viorst's character Alexander would call a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. On 2 separate occasions, Satan approaches God requesting permission to test Job to see if his loyalties were real or if they only ran skin deep. Is he truly a God-fearing man, or is he what pastor and author Kyle Idleman would call a fan of God? The kind of guy who cheers for God when his team is winning, but he's also the first one to blow out of the stadium when things are starting to look bleak. Now, I'll kind of step back from there and allow you to read for yourself exactly what happens and the conversations that follow, but I do want to lay a couple questions at your feet before you do that. So first of all, are you a follower of Jesus? Or are you just a fan? Is your trust in the sovereign lordship of Jesus Christ? Or is it in your job, your retirement account, or maybe even in this case, the advancement of science? The other question, who are you turning to in times of struggle? Is it someone who's going to commiserate with you and offer advice, as you'll see in our story with Job's wife and his 3 friends, who, by the way, are powerless to do anything about the circumstances? Or do we do as Hebrews 4 tells us to do, and that is to run first to our sympathetic high priest, who knows our struggles firsthand and is more than capable of providing the grace and the mercy that we need in our time? Believe me, church, this is a message that I've been preaching on repeat to myself over the last few months. Now, I would say this, let us by no means shy away from the community of believers, the church that God has given to us, but let us run first to the author and perfecter of our faith, God himself. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our last stop of this week, Psalms 57 through 61. Now, you're going to see that each one of these is going to be unique in its own way, and to address each one individually is probably going to take a while. So we're going to go ahead and break out just kind of the broad stroke brush here and just paint a thematic picture for you here, just to wet your whistle for this week. Now, each one of these Psalms is unique in its own way, And we see David either seeking God's protection or his provision. He knows full well that if he is going to escape King Saul and his men, or if he's going to win the next battle, the only way that's going to happen is under the watchful eye and the provision of God himself. And so throughout each of these Psalms, you're going to see something interesting. You're going to see David come before God humbly, but also expectantly. He has no idea how God is going to answer his prayers, but he's fully 100% confident that he is going to. So then I have one more big question for you here before we wrap up. I know a lot of questions to consider, but I want you guys to really dig into this week. I want you to contemplate this week's Psalms and ask yourself, what are your prayers like? Are they laced more with fear or with faith? Are you spending your time telling God how big your problems are? Or are you spending your time telling God that you believe that he is so much bigger and more powerful than whatever it is that we could possibly be facing right now? With all that being said, I want to close with these song lyrics that were inspired by one of our Psalms this week, Psalm 61. The chorus of the song goes like this. He says, "You are my strong tower, a shelter over me, beautiful and mighty, everlasting King. You are my strong tower, a fortress for the weak. Your name is true and holy, and your face is all I seek." Oh, church, that would be true of us this week. I hope you guys have an awesome, absolutely amazing week in God's word and just walking in the grace and power that only he can provide for you. See you guys. I love you. Talk to you soon.